Good evening, cats and crittens. I'm Ben, also known as Meta Mongoose, over in the Crit Cats Discord, and the race is over. Our group has run the Owlbear race, are hanging out in the winner's circle, and this evening we're gonna just have a little chat about how things went and kind of go over some of the background of the campaign. Do a little. I got a little bit of showing off to do with the PDF that we actually used for the adventure, and answer any questions. There were a lot of paths that the party could have taken, and a lot of interesting backstory for the various other racers and or the owlbears themselves that did not come up in the game because the party had chosen the owlbears they did and ran into the party that they did. So we'll explore some of that as well. Um, the players this evening, we have our entire cast here this evening, and I have not my Excel file up here that has all the information I need, though I do know these people. Just need to get my other Excel file up real quick. There we go. Now I can actually talk about the adventure when they have questions.
That's what I was needed for.
Yeah, I have. I was like, oh wait, all the notes on the elemental trap are on this other page. But anyway, introductions are in order for the winner's circle. We had, of course, Sasha, who played the Silver Dragonborn Paladin Thrakrin, Nick, who played the Eladrin Ranger Elrovis, Lynn, who played the Copper Dragonborn Warlock Vincothregrin, and of course John playing the Eladrin Monk Dersim. Again, winners of the race. What did just general thoughts on the adventure? If you have any particular parts that entertained you more than others?
I mean, aside from Dersim's suffering,
There was a lot of Dersim suffering.
There was a lot of fun moments. There were some really cute ideas that I really enjoyed. So there was a few ones that I just remember. Ben, you obviously know I love goblins, so when you threw goblins in there, I was absolutely happy.
The Goblin Bridge, yes.
Like those goblins.
We'll get there. We'll get there. But that was actually a happy accident. They're not original to the adventure.
I was about to say, that's a very Ben thing to add to this game.
As soon as you add goblins, I'm like, oh, yes.
That was an addition to make a part of the encounter longer than 3 seconds to overcome.
What do you mean? We just give them gold for 2 seconds and then we're done?
Oh no, you could have done that. But there was the bridge itself was a riddle bridge that had one riddle, and if you answered it, you could just go past.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, we need to pad this out just a little bit.
Kind of on the similar note, I feel like while I understand where you were going with it in hindsight, the little workshop that I think needed a little bit more, because while yes, obviously the kind of intent was give us something to potentially move past the next encounter, it was we're on a race. Last time we met anyone, literally the last time, we kind of had a freaking what's it called? Not assault. Ambush. That's the word I'm looking for. Yes. Obviously, we're not going to trust anything we're looking at, and also it's a race.
That's fair.
And that would have been the third house that something may have tried to kill us at.
If we were a bit more chaotic, say, I think totally would have stolen the nearest part and figured something out. But that just wasn't our party.
That's fair. And we'll talk about that one here when we get to that bit of the race as well, because there were some additions and changes I had to make for that also. But any other thoughts before we start going through the guide? Going once, going twice. All right. So a couple of things. Here, let me bring up the adventure real quick. So this is the Owlbear Run adventure. It 4th edition adventure, written actually by Chris Perkins and Steve Townsend, and they did a pretty fun job of it. It was one of those 4th ed adventures that they were throwing out there back if you were a D&D Insider subscriber.
Quick, I'm gonna nitpick.
Yes.
How is that owlbear attached to that cart?
It is hitched up by like around the waist. You can kind of see underneath it. There's like a leather strap, and then like around by the wings.
They should have made that a different color, or the owlbear a different color, because there's so much.
It would have stuck out better.
I know it's a thing with classic D&D art where everything's the same goddamn color of brown usually, but like it's more like Ebron. Things are colorful.
Right.
See, I would have accepted the answer of faith and an elf with bracers of strength, but
was that it? The elf is what's holding the owlbear. Definitely that. But anyway, important to note, because of just my general mix-up, you guys actually ran the race backwards. You should have started in Telvorn and gone to Melvorn, but they, of course, are very similarly named, and I originally screwed it up. So I just placed the tokens on the finish side, and we moved the other direction as we ran the race proper.
Yeah,
which
hardly important.
Arguably not that big of a deal. It's the race either way. But yeah, so that was the gist of that. You had paid your entry fee, you didn't pay your entry fee. You could have if you didn't want a sponsor. Sponsors actually were mildly important in this adventure because each sponsor had a random encounter that was specific to them that could have been in the race lineup. There are actually more encounters than there are nodes on the... I think there's a map over here. Yeah. So each of these X's represents an encounter along the race, and it is the DM's job to go through the list of encounters and sprinkle them in wherever they want. And there are more encounters than there are X's for the party to, get from point A to point B. So there were actually so many that I was able to basically double up and still have extra encounters. So the party could do 2 encounters, which would eat up like an appropriately sized episode, and then move on. This is actually supposed to be kind of like a one-shot that you can knock out in like 4 hours around a table with some friends. And so you can see here where each of the teams, you could see where they had planned on traveling. And if the party, of course, ever crossed paths with the teams, they would have their encounter modified by having the opposing team in that encounter as well. You guys ran across this a couple of times. But each of the sponsors had a specific encounter to them, and if you happen to be in an encounter that your sponsor was the owner of, you could like flash your badge or say a special password and just negate the encounter. So I actually rolled randomly to determine what encounter would be the special encounter, and that way I wouldn't know if you guys had pulled the right sponsor until it had happened. And also that's why we also doubled up on encounters, just in case you happen to pull the sponsor encounter that you could just easily avoid. Let's see. The Owlbear. Let's see. Do you have any questions on the sponsors at all? You ran across them in town. You had there was Lady Fosgard, the dwarven diplomat. There was Lord Burl, the sheriff. Then there was Lord Claven, the disgraced, and Sir Tomir, the knight. And in the end, I think you guys, if I remember correctly, you guys had the sheriff as your sponsor.
Yeah.
With the Owlbear kitten. That was his Owlbear.
I think we only got to talk to like 2 of the sponsors, I think.
Yes. You talked to
we spied on
the knight and the sheriff, spied on the Lord Claven, and did not talk to the dwarves.
Nope.
What are the dwarves like? I just kind of out of curiosity.
So, Lady Fosgod is a young dwarven diplomat. She does not trust the nobility of Duke Hightower. She, they don't believe that she's crafty enough to know about their like politicking, but she definitely knows what's going on. And so in order to get her sponsorship, you have to impress her with knowledge of dwarven culture, stonework, or customs, and that kind of endears her to you because she recognizes that you like know about her culture and don't just write her off as some like country bumpkin.
Yeah. Could any of us actually have done that? Because I kind of went with the impression
it would require some kind of like history check of some kind. So
I might have been able to do it.
Could attempt it, but yeah, she immediately sponsors the Stormhammers if you guys don't take that slot because it's run by dwarf, so it checks out.
I had a decent chance with that. I had profession in history.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Lord. Let's see. You had the sheriff. He, is just looking for good, decent people to run a race. He's not looking for a bunch of like dirty cheaters. Whereas Lord Claven, the disgraced, definitely looking for some cheaters. He's a shadowy, evil person. I guess his father had been a traitor at some point, and he's now back to reclaim the family name after his exile, and he's looking for a bunch of people who are willing to do anything. Rules be damned. And then, of course, you ran into Sir Tamir. He's, of course, looking for some strong folk. He's looking for the muscle.
Yep, we didn't have it.
We did.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, we did.
The dice did not have it for sure.
I'm pretty sure if you fail strength checks as our strong party member 3 or 4 times, we don't have a strong party member.
Well, we do. We do.
But yeah, so that was the various folk there. The Owlbear teams that you, of course, had to deal with. Scroll down. Linnell's Fey Band. Let's do the Owlbears first. So there were the other various Owlbears. Kitten, the one you ended up with. Manslayer, Terrible Tharzadoon, and Lucky Lady and Rolling Boulder. Like I said, you ended up with Kitten. Each of the Owlbears had their own minor quest as well. You found out what Kittens was. She was pregnant and was going to lay some eggs mid-race. That was her deal.
Oh
You could-
God!
Huh?
I'm just reading some of Manslayer. I'm like, oh, that would have sucked.
Oh, yeah. He is a
Unlike-
coward.
Yeah, unlike the other owlbears, Manslayer does not defend himself in combat and uses his action to flee. He cannot be commanded to attack sea owlbears in combat.
Right.
Yeah, no, that sucks.
Wow.
Yes, he is a coward. His special mission is that he at some point gets cornered by some direwolves, and instead of defeating the direwolves for him, you have to like cheerlead him on to defeat the direwolves and overcome his fear.
Oh, that wouldn't have happened.
Well, I mean, the way it's set up, like you're kind of like separated from him in an unhelpful way. Like you're busy dealing with busy dealing with the wolf pack while the two dire wolves like flank him after he breaks away from you.
I feel like we would have basically tried to rush to get to him, and then he might have died in the process. I don't think we would have thought of that.
But yeah, that was his side goal. Then let's see, Terrible Tharzadoon is I believe he's just very sleepy and unmotivated, and he decides to just hibernate mid-race, and you have to get him motivated again somehow. That's his special encounter. He eats a bunch and then just goes to sleep and doesn't wake up again. The one I liked the most of the lineup, besides Kittens, because forcing party members to have to deal with owlbear eggs is hilarious, is Lucky Lady. Hers is she used to have a mate, and when they caught her for the owlbear race, they separated her from her mate, and mid-race, her owlbear mate catches up with you, and you have to like not kill the other owlbear, but also like get across to the fact that like you're gonna return his girlfriend eventually. And also like get across to Lucky Lady that, you know, she'll be free after you're done with the race or something. That was her side gig quest. It's just you have to handle her love sickness mid race.
Well, we did.
And Rolling Boulder is the kind of throwaway owlbear. If the party doesn't have a sponsor, they get the Rolling Boulder, and he is just random of one of the other four owlbear problems. Just he has one of their owlbear problems. They didn't make a special one for him. He's just DM's choice problem.
Be creative or not.
Yeah. But yeah, they're like, yeah, you could just use one of the other owlbear problems, or you can just make up your own. That's perfectly fine. But yeah, so we had the other teams, Linnell's Fey Band, the Eladrin Noble visiting from the Feywild. She represents the Fey people and is a very, very haughty elf who 100% believes she can win this race because, well, she can control owlbears.
Mm-hmm. So, if anyone was curious why Derseem hated the Fae so much, he was like a ex-court like assassin and got ousted due to like some kind of Fae politics bullshit, and has since learned to hate most Fae.
So yes, did not get along with Linnell.
So every chance to avoid them, and especially since she looked like potential, like upper class, like just
oh
avoid,
yes,
avoid.
very very much. But no,
I'm just having the phrase "winter of your discontent"
Yeah.
going through my mind now.
But no, when even though her team is unlikely to cross paths unless you kind of chose the way around the mountain that you did, uh, she doesn't her unlike the other teams, hers does not fight. She attempts to charm your owlbear into causing problems and delay you.
Got lucky then.
But all of the teams, much like how each of the owlbears has a uh, a response to force tactics and charm tactics. So if you tried to use force, there would be some kind of penalty involved or a positive modifier involved. Each of the teams has a modifier as well. So like Gremble Stormhammers, if they're doing a physical challenge, they get like +6 to their roll. If they're doing a mental challenge, a +4. If they're doing an owlbear or mental's +5, owlbear a +4. Now there's a table that we'll get to later that kind of once you add up the numbers, if they meet a certain threshold, they pass their challenge or get stuck on their challenge or do so well, they bump ahead like 2 spaces in the race. And so that's at the end of each session when I rolled for what kind of challenge they had and how they did it. That's the table was slightly modified because these numbers are a little wonky, but it was basically to determine how far along they got. And early on, Linnell's Fey Band did really well and skipped ahead like 2 spots. But because they took the longer route, they did not get too far ahead of you guys. Whereas the Brute Squad got a whole bunch of failures back to back, and they just did not get very far at all in this race. Whereas the Stormhammers basically did a 1-for-1 with you guys along the way. Do you have any questions about the other teams? While we're here in this section. No? Okay. So again, we had an entire section about running the race, the Brute Squad, and the Fey Band and the Stormhammers all were doing the NPC team battle table to determine what challenges they were running into, whereas you guys had all of the encounters that were listed in game. So we had a whole bunch of them to choose from. Their table was over here, so whether they made no progress, moved 1 encounter, moved 2 based on their rolls. There was a little section for team clashes, so if you came across another team during the course of the race, we could kind of go over like how each team has a section in it about how it handles team clashes. So like if Linnell crosses paths with you, she'll try to screw up your owlbear. If the Stormhammers crossed paths with you, he is very competitive and he won't fight you, or as long as you don't fight him, he will just push his team harder and get a bonus on his next roll because he's just, a good-natured competitive person. And the Brute Squad is 100% going to try to kill your owlbear because you can't win without an owlbear. So that was their plan, was either to kill your owlbear, or if they lose the fight and lose their owlbear, try to kidnap your owlbear later along the race so that they could still win.
Are the paths for each team like pre-planned?
Yes. So here's the map for each of the teams. Each team has already pre-planned their race map, and so it is up to the players to decide how their. This is why you guys had to pre-plan your route across the mountain, so that I knew at which choice point along the way you might have run into one of the other teams. So that was a way for me to know ahead of time which encounters would involve the other team. And since you guys went north out of Milvorn, the first team you ran into was the Fey Band, and instead of me trying to decide whether you ran across the Stormhammers or the Brute Squad first, if you'd have gone the other way out of town. But yeah, their routes were all pre-planned. As far as encounters go, there were a bunch to choose from, but we can kind of go over some of them here, just so we can re-see everyone's. There we go. We can kind of re-see everyone's route that you had taken. You had, like I said, briefly crossed paths with the Fey Band, and then kind of wiggled around the middle of the mountain, and then kind of ended up crossing paths again with the Stormhammers near the end. At no point were you going to run across the Brute Squad based on your route, unless they had done really well and you would have caught up to them near the end. But yes, I got to do a little bit of art for Telvorn. There was the scene where you all got to hang out and meet all of the various nobles and the owlbears. Any particular notes on meeting the nobles and or owlbears, since you only did meet two of the nobles? What do you think of the owlbears?
Personality that I was expecting, but beyond that, I don't have any notes.
All right. This was your first adventure into the Lost Trail. Now, this one, the original deal for it was basically going to just be an illusion that went across the trail and got you lost. The way the adventure wanted you to possibly solve this, if you couldn't figure out the powerful illusion on your own, was that your owlbear was still trying to eat berries along the actual path. Even though you couldn't see the actual path, your owlbear could. And if you just followed your owlbear as it ate berries along the real path, you wouldn't have gotten lost.
Interesting.
That was slow. We had to move the berries ourselves.
You did decide to move. You did decide to break off some berries and move them around the illusionary terrain yourselves. But you were also dealing with the Fey Band and them trying to screw with your owlbear. So you resolved that pretty handily. Then next was the Lord of Death. You beat that poor hobo into the ground. He is in fact a poor hobo. Here, let me bring up see if I can find it. Yeah, here he is. So he is not a wizard. He's a madman named Kaz, who wanders the hills of these abandoned mines and obsesses with places of death. He wears a battered great helm, which he found on the ground somewhere, and a beat up black robe, and carries like a rusty hunting axe. Where he found these items, anyone's guess. The wizards are aware of his presence and took advantage of his madness by effectively giving him like stone skin and protecting him with like magic spells. And then he was basically a miner before the mines of the mountain kind of dried up. He lost his wife and children to disease, became crazy, and is just kind of wandering around for you to find. Now, the thing that is interesting about this encounter is there was a you could either fight him, which is what you did, or if all of you had gone through with a proper observance of his weird wanting you to give him something which was alive but lives no longer. And it says here he accepts the remains of any creature as well as food or items that are clearly from a once living creature. Unless you can convince him by justifying some object that he will like take a piece of cloth or common thing, as long as you can make an interesting or elaborate explanation as to why it was living and is now no longer living. But if all of you had done that, he knows a shortcut known as the Gates of Death, which are in fact just an abandoned mine passage that cuts through the mountain, and it causes the other teams to have a penalty to their advancement because you skipped ahead using the tunnel.
I will say, looking back at this one and seeing what we did, I wish we had more things like this where it was very obvious that the wizards were like coming into the event and just like fucking with it. like another of just like, I don't know, like say, I don't know, the goblins. They gave them like some weird fancy magic nonsense or whatever. Like, or like another like crazy magic terrain thing that was specifically and clearly made by them. I was hoping.
Okay,
with how much that was.
You were wanting more wizard, more obvious wizard traps.
Yeah, with how that was talked up, especially at the beginning, I was expecting a bit more of that. It's more wackiness.
Okay.
Because like that was a fun little stupid thing, where it's like you could do this thing, or you could fight him. And in fairness, there probably should be like in most things a third way of potentially getting around him. But like, it was an interesting little bit, and because it very obviously tied back in, I really like that.
Yeah, there's a few of these that are kind of, well, like the cottage was the wizard doing.
Yeah, I guess that part.
Yeah.
But there was the crossing, the river crossing that you did. Now, this particular one was pretty bog standard in the adventure. It was like, oh no, rushing waters. Your Owlbear doesn't want to cross the rushing waters. That's all you have to do is somehow get the Owlbear across the water, which was kind of boring.
Yeah, this is one thing that I like. If I was an editor for this adventure, I would look and go, "This is boring. Make it more interesting.
Right.
Come back to me in a day."
And so while I was looking for one, something more interesting to add to this, and two, a map to use for this through my map collection, I found this map, and it had like this really weird kind of like magical circle-y thing going on. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just throw in a simple like elemental puzzle that you guys can play around with. And I needed an excuse to reward you guys with something that could grant you some like long rest powers. Because you guys don't get a long rest throughout this entire adventure. So being able to kind of help against all of the encounter economy by giving you access to at least one long rest, I was like, oh, we'll just make a cool potion that gives you a long rest. And if you couldn't have figured this one out, we'll figure something else out later in the adventure. I'll figure out a way to get you something. But yeah, the the little elemental puzzle where you had each of the four greater evil elementals and an offering plate between each of them. And honestly, anything that you put in the bowls that would match up with what they, like a combined system would have got you, would have worked. It was just seeing what the players, what you guys could come up with to fit that need, and you did. It took a little while, but we got there, and you got some fancy potion out of it. So I did enjoy the attempting to zip line across the river, and in some cases not doing it as well as just being like, sorry kitten, and just pushing her off into the water after tying her to the, anchoring her to the other side.
I mean, I think it was pretty clear our crew isn't that mean.
In retrospect, though, we did do that to a pregnant owlbear.
I mean, you didn't know she was pregnant at the time.
I had a guess, in fairness.
Found out.
I had a hint, yeah.
Like nesting. Oh Lord. This is why I sent a message directly to Ben after that. I'm like, please never include this in a game I'm in ever again.
Yeah. But let me switch back over to the main screen here. There was the house that wanted to lure you in, the charming cottage. It was like, oh, come in and eat the food and rest. It'll be great. And then turned into a giant house mimic and tried to eat you. In fact, did eat one of you briefly.
Part of that Dare Seem suffering brand I apparently have.
Yeah.
I figured the problem with that was just their seam was too sour for it.
There was a lot of burning it.
Can't
from
wait
the
for you to be
inside.
in one of my games, Nick, for me to eat you with some giant house or something. And then I ask you to roll a new character.
The house just but yeah, no, I like the giant house. And luckily for me, there were it was. Again, this is like a 4th edition adventure, so they're like, this is a hazard of some kind that the party has to solve via, the rules for basically the strange rules that 4th Ed had for figuring out and disarming hazards and traps. Because back then, traps had actual stats, and you had to do some things to make it no longer function. But I was like, that doesn't really translate well into 5th edition, other than a very confusing skill challenge that would have gone rather quickly. But
I did disarm it by setting it on fire.
You did disarm it. You set it on fire from the inside. But the good news is, by the time we started work on this adventure, Wizards had put out a stat block for a house-sized mimic, and I was like, good enough. It has all the things I need. It can eat people. It can be a big house. It has a weird sticky tongue that it can use to suck you in with. It'll be great. You guys did kill my poor house mimic. It was
got what
sad.
It deserved.
But assuming that you had not killed the house mimic, it would have let you out eventually. But you would have, the other team would have gotten a bonus because you'd have been slightly delayed. So they would have gotten a bonus to their passing roll. Then there was the scene where Kitten laid her eggs. So there was the charming little flower and apiary hut with the lady and her 3 children. The good news is you did stop. You did stop all of the entire big problem of the adventure, where Kitten was supposed to break away from you and charge into the house and begin to nest in the house and scare away like all of the kids and the mom, and she was gonna be like, "Get this owlbear out of my house," and you'd have had to like figure out how to, as Kitten was like literally dismantling the house to make a nest, stop her from doing undue damage to the poor lady's house.
I thought she was upset with us when the kitten was just tearing up her garden.
Right. You did manage to stop. Thrakron was strong enough then to stop Kitten from breaking free and charging into the house to lay some eggs. But Kitten did end up tearing a good chunk of the flower garden and turning it into a bush nest. But you guys resolved that, so it worked out, and nobody got like viciously assaulted by an angry lady with a honey pot and spoon.
I'm glad we caused slightly less chaos than the absolute maximum amount of chaos that could have happened. Yes.
Yeah, this particular scene was very chaotic in the adventure notes, and it would have been a real big mess trying to get Kitten out of that house. You having stopped her from going into the house proper, you made the adventure, this part of the adventure, way easier, and acquired some eggs, and for a brief time, a wheelbarrow.
I made sure they paid for that wheelbarrow.
I mean, I did too.
It's very important that you pay for the wheelbarrow. That lady was going to be very, very angry with you if you didn't.
Wizards, you need to go up and do anything this lady asks you to.
It was more like I made the guy who destroyed the wheelbarrow pay
I mean,
for it.
if things happen in this specific area yearly and she's still choosing to live here, at that point, I think it's her fault.
It's like, you live here. You know what happens here. This is your problem.
I think that got pointed out to her, and then she's like, "That's not my problem."
Well, yeah, we're obviously not going to convince her of that. You can't go to someone who lives in Florida and say, "Oh, your house got destroyed by a hurricane for the fourth time. Maybe that's the problem." You're not going to convince them that.
They just go, "We love it here."
Some things are worth the price of an in-state annual pass to Disney World.
Yeah. We have access to a beach. Sometimes the beach is our front door. But
Don't worry, give it another decade. It'll be a lot closer.
yeah.
Gators and scorpions. Yay.
But anyway, so yeah, the Riddle Bridge. So what happened here was, like I said, the adventure is very very sparse on this encounter. It's basically, it's a bridge. There's a riddle. If you don't answer the riddle, you can't cross the bridge and have to like go the long way around, and it costs you time. It's one of those like small time sink adventures parts, that encounters that doesn't really have any resolution other than, did the party answer a riddle? Good, then they pass. But I wanted it to be slightly more exciting, and also I was looking for some good bridge maps that I had, and I found this one that had all of the like goblin scrawl all over it. And I was like, all right, we're adding goblins to this encounter, and the fail state for riddle problems is just more goblin attacks.
Ow.
And we did eventually answer a riddle, not the first one, but the second one. And so I was like, a couple of the goblins attack, but the boss goblin does not attack you. It was good because he could dominate monster, and he was going to dominate kitten and make her attack you.
Would have been
Um,
fine. We would have
so
maybe lived.
no, he had. Let's see, do I have his? So Jingle Jinx, Speaker of the Leaves. Here, he had 8 spell casting and his spell book. He could actually conjure Fae, but he didn't. He had mage armor on. He could make silent images. He had Eldritch Blast, not that it mattered. Vicious Mockery, all those fun things. Dimension Door. But he had Hold Monster and Dominate Beast. And Phantasmal Force. And Sleep and Seeming and all those fun spells. So...
Hey Ben, remember
Yeah.
when you specifically said we can't talk to kitten because they're not a beast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would do what now?
I thought he had Dominate Monster. Apparently he has Dominate
Dominant
Beast.
monster's a pretty high level spell.
But he had Hold Monster, so that would have helped.
Let's see. What level spell is that? I'm curious
Dominate
now.
Monster, like
8th!
8th, yeah, that sounds about right. But anyway, so he had a pile. He had spells all the way up to like 6th level to play with.
Christ.
But you didn't have to fight him. He was going to be the friendly riddle giver, unless you decided to brute force your way through the pass here. In which case he would have become a much stronger problem because he had all the magics and all of his assistants were firing arrows from like little archery nests on the side. So, but yeah, no, you kicked his coin skull into the water.
He got what he deserved.
He was friendly. No,
Cool,
he
his friends weren't.
his friends were not. Then there was we finally got to the part where real combat encounters started happening, because up to this point there were like very small combat encounters that were relatively easy to overcome. This one was a big old troll and a bunch of bugbears, which in retrospect should not have used bugbears in an owlbear race, because I could not get those things squared away mid-combat over and over again. Should have just picked any other monster. That's on me. But good news, you did not have to worry about the wagon being broken in this fight. And managed to not only kill the troll, but make sure it stayed dead long enough for you guys to get away. The next fight that you were in was one of the sponsor challenges. This is Lord Claven's sponsor challenge, where he sets a group of mercenaries to disguise themselves as locals and ambush you in attempts to kill your owlbear. So if you had been on Lord Claven's side, you could have like flashed them the sign and then been like, "Ah, yes, we will delay the other teams." Wink, wink.
I mean, at that point, I would have been mad at them for even trying to fuck with us.
Well, they wouldn't have tried, is the
Yeah.
point. They would have called out like the password or what, the catchphrase, and you could have given them the secret sign, and then would have been on your way, no problem. So But you did beat them up. Managed to take the archer alive. They were not interested in dying over this, so
Good choice.
they're they were of the opinion that this is all well and good until I'm the last one standing, and maybe I don't want to die. So, but other than that, we went to the section on my adventure list called Owlbear War Wagon. In this particular one, there is a wagon maker here, and if you had stopped, knocked on his door, and inquired about the wagons outside, with a little bit of negotiating, he would have sold you a wagon to chariot your owlbear to victory and give you a little bit of some advantages on the upcoming problems that you would have had to run across. But in very D&D fashion, as a party, having already been burned, as you said, at least twice on random people you met along the way, you decided instead to just kind of nope right past this encounter.
I think if it were me running this, what I would have changed to make it a little bit more enticing would have been something along the lines of like having him already be working outside and maybe already working on a wagon. That I think would have gotten us a little bit more attention.
Yes, that probably would have been better.
But hindsight.
I did just have a guy sitting outside a house that ambushed you, so I didn't want to have the same.
You could have also had him
that
potentially like interact with us and done something, especially if like looking at him, he's apparently a quote unquote dwarf noble. I think that by itself would have probably gotten us to be a little bit more.
That's just because that was the token I used.
Yeah,
he's just a guy. I didn't rename his token appropriately.
But even then, like I feel like that would have been a bit more enticing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I probably should have at least had him like step out and call you over, or at least be outside working on something.
Having him sequestered away was like I have no reason to interact with you, and I am not going to steal one of your carts. And also, we've already bought a thing at this point.
Right. It's like you have half the Iron Giant living in your lake.
Yeah, that also was not enticing. If anything, I feel like we needed a completely different map because that spooked me. I'm not gonna lie.
I was running really low on huts that had wagons out front that looked like maybe an inventor or a craftsman lived in. That was just probably a bad map choice on my part, but
another thing that probably didn't help this one was just the randomness of where it appeared on the run.
That's also true. I do personally like sticking the war wagon near the end of the run, mostly because it lets the party spend the first part of the adventure getting to know the owlbear and kind of working with it, so that when you get to the point where it's like, we want to hitch an owlbear up to a wagon, you're not hitching up a very unhappy owlbear to a wagon. And so I like sticking it near the end, but maybe in this particular configuration, it should have been maybe further back, maybe at least before the brigands, because having a friendly moment before having to fight some brigands would have not, had you guys on edge coming right into it. A thing that I did have to kind of change on the fly was the orc fight, because of the fact that you did not take the wagon. The original plan for this was assuming a wagon was going to be chosen, and it was going to be an orc chase scene through the forest, where at each point the tokens were just representing where the orcs were going, and this map was just a filler for a whole chase scene through a dark mushroom forest, and there was going to be like a part where some orcs riding like wargs were going to come out of the woods and like bump up against the wagon, and one of them was going to try to like jump on the wagon and maybe steal an egg, or you have to basically the standard chariot wagon chase scenes that you see in your various fantasy movies, where everyone's kind of running down the road, and you dodge low-hanging branches and ramping over fallen logs and whatever else. It was going to be a Fast and Furious moment. But because you did not get the wagon, I had to quickly come over here, delete the wagon, and then when you guys moved on to the map, we had to deal with just the orc horde in specific. So that's just a bit of adventure changing on the fly based on your choices previous that kind of happened the way it did.
I wanted to take the cart.
But you
And
didn't.
then speak up.
Yeah.
I did. You told me no, so I gave up.
You can convince people that aren't me.
I tried, but again, I got shut down very quickly,
Is,
so I gave up.
Yep. Overruled. So
I think,
that's fine.
I think that was more of the we just got burned, and even happy-go-lucky Elrovis was, yeah, let's just keep going.
But in the end, we got to fight some orcs. Got into an orc fight and had to pull in a dire wolf to cause a little bit of mischief. But that part, you guys didn't have your owlbear kidnapped, and the orcs were not going to be owlbear run champions because they didn't steal your owlbear. I like that that's their plan.
I will say, kind of on like that point, I was not expecting to position myself as like kind of weird, grumpy party dad. I was expecting to be like off in the corner and often outvoted, especially after session 1. So getting as much pull as I did not expect that. I thought I would have been shut down a lot harder.
Yeah, these things, they happen.
Yeah.
But I did get to repurpose the all of the mechanics that I had set aside for the chase scene for when we got out of this fight and we're doing basically the run through the end of the finish line. I just reflavored them from like instead of some orcs coming over to like attack the wagon, it would be spinning blades or something popping up out of the ground, or stuff like that. So that was just a quick reskin of that particular thing that I was going to do, but just slightly after you got done fighting a bunch of orcs. I was excited that the race did come down to 3 teams this time in the running, because usually the couple of times I've run this adventure, there's always there's always a clear one other team and the party, but not more than that. And it was kind of happy for me that we at least got more than just you versus one of the random teams in the final kind of pass down to the exit. Though Linnell did not get to catch up in time to cause much havoc. You guys kept pulling ahead of her and delaying, and her rolls were not good enough to pull ahead enough to start causing all kinds of problems with her illusion magics.
to be fair, Arovis did have to guarantee which team got second.
is we actively making sure your bet played out?
Well, if we didn't get first, I had to pay back their team. That wasn't going to be. I needed money.
But yeah, so that was the run. Like I said, it was again originally like a little one shot. I figured, since each of the encounters areas there was enough of them, plus I could double up on 2 encounters per area to stretch into kind of enough episodes to make it a little short series. It stretched out pretty decently. Does anyone have any final thoughts on it? Any things that stuck out to you that you want to know more about?
A moment. I enjoyed this character enough that I'd be interested in playing them again sometime.
I was going to say, while making our characters separately, we all still managed to make this nice uniform team.
It did entertain me that I got 2 Eladrin and 2 Dragonborn.
My only desire would to be, we need like a human or something. A human or like a dwarf.
Human
We'll find-
token.
We'll go somewhere.
Human.
We'll go somewhere and find ourselves a pet bard. It'll be fine.
No, anything but a bard.
Just put a sign up in the tavern looking for a 5th party member. Must be human or dwarf.
No.
I will say, if I ever continue this character, they're not a monk anymore. I don't care what they are. They're not a monk.
I would 100% abandon monk.
Congrats, they're now a rogue that occasionally has healing magic, I guess.
Yeah, taking rogue and like some kind of initiate feat that lets you get a spell of some kind. If you want to keep that healing bit added in, or I don't know, honestly, any of the rogue options are better than monk.
So boring. So boring.
Having played monk recently, I spent a lot of my time just not playing monk. I played a fun character that happened to do monk things on occasion.
I look at my roommate who loves monks, and I'm like, how do you enjoy this?
Not enough.
In his words, punch, more punch, all punch.
Yeah.
All punch.
Yes, but eventually the key points run out, and it's just punch after that. There isn't more punch and all punch, it's just punch.
Overall, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this little crew we had. I enjoyed giving Thakrin shit as much as it was like a step close to me. I'm glad we were able to play that off a bit.
Of the irrevocable bullying for no reason. Yes, it's great. Makes me feel great as a person.
Art.
No, Lynn, this was one of your first forays into 5th edition. So how did this play out for you?
Yeah, this was pretty good. I feel like I've learned like a decent amount of 5th edition while just like trying to read through stuff. One of the things I've definitely noticed between like this and 3.5 is that things do more things. Like prestidigitation has like 5 different modes, and I keep on forgetting about each one. Because it's just
right. Like 2 of them come up ever.
I mean, fair, yeah.
But yeah, no, this was a interesting little put together, and I'm glad that all of you could join in on it, because it was kind of fun to get a nice little short series up and running to kind of give me something to do on my Tuesday nights.
That's all we were. No, I'm kidding.
No,
I'm kidding.
As fun as that is, I really want to go back to Baldur's Gate 3. Because I'm playing a game with Lynn and their SO, and yeah, I want to make that our Tuesday.
Well, good news. With having won the adventure and made it to the end of the debrief, you in fact are free to do what you will with your Tuesdays. But let's see. Going forward,
Masticate
yeah.
me.
Going forward, we do have some other things planned in the future. There are some other campaigns that other groups in our streaming circle will be launching here eventually. And since this little short series is over, I assume at some point we may take a month off. But Sasha and I may be back for our monthly tavern talk fun. If any of you guys want to join in on any of those as well, just let me know. It's perfectly fine.
I have a lot of fun in those.
We'll sit around and make up fun dungeons and talk about fun D&D things just for an hour or so. But anyway, so with that aside, again, great adventure, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Those of you who are watching later or checking this out on YouTube, if this is the one you decided to join us in, go back and watch the first adventure and see all the fun, exciting times that everyone had up until now. Go
Sorry
check
for the
out.
spoilers.
Yeah, sorry for the. Now that we've walked through the entire adventure and spoiled the complete thing for you, the party did make it to the end in first place. So
I mean,
go
if
see how they did it.
if that's a problem for you, just go back and watch Star Chasers instead.
Yeah, or you could do that. We do have
Was
other.
in that too, I think.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, for one session.
I think
And
was
it
it
was
more
a
than one?
It was
I
two.
stopped show
was like
running
two.
after a bit.
I thought it was
It was two.
two.
I did
Okay,
too.
yeah.
I know for sure it was two.
Um,
But it was fantastic to at the end just be like, "Uh-oh, what's wrong? Bye-bye." Gone.
your
Everyone's
spatial,
like,
your
"No!"
your spatial astral mushrooms broke. They finally wore off.
Got down from the high.
Well, guys, we've seen weirder stuff. Let's keep going.
But yeah, definitely go check out some of our other shows. We did a Spelljammer game called Star Chasers. It was a lot of fun. We had a bunch of little one shots. We have a group who ran through the Tomb of Annihilation and then eventually did the Tomb of Horrors after that because they weren't done with the most dangerous tombs they could run across. But yeah, definitely go check all that stuff out. Come hang out on our Discord, chat with us, see what fun stuff we're up to. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, do the subscribings, all those fun things. If you have all the, Amazon Prime and or Twitch Prime subscriptions you're not using, feel free to throw them our way. It gives us some more resources to do some cooler things. And, Jeff Bezos doesn't need your money. He's got plenty of money.
I mean, it's just going back into his pockets. Let's be real.
Half of it is. But anyway, other than that, we will catch you all later. Thanks for hanging out with us. Bye.